Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions every single day. You can throw those questions into Makana, of course. If you don't know what Makana is, to get on the emails, all you have to do is go to officehours.global/join, and you fill it out, and you'll start getting emails every day. In those emails, hidden at the bottom, you'll see a place where you can go to Makana. You can join Discord. You can go into After Hours. There's lots of things that you can do if you're part of the community. So you can go ahead and ask the questions, vote on the questions, talk about the questions. If you aren't there, don't worry. You can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, and ask those questions 24/7, and we'll file them into the next question. Just make sure that we don't really talk about office hours itself other than Sundays. And so if you have questions about office hours itself, or you want to be argumentative, then the best time to do that is on Sunday. But if you put it in during the week, we're not going to answer that question. So anyway, but if you have tech questions during the weekday, throw them into askofficehours.global, and we'll get right to them. All right, let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Alex, what do we have?
First question this morning is from Paul Walhouse in Austin, Texas. In After Hours, Matthew Parker gave me a terrific tutorial on the Zoom LiveTrak L-8 connected to a Lewitt Mic and a Stream Deck. Where does this little unit rank in the pantheon of mixers?
Go, Courtney.
Well, I think they're going after the Rodecaster Pro, only it really depends on the quality of the preamps. Zoom has been known to have some pretty good preamps. This is what the mixer looks like. It's got 4 mic pre's, unlike the I think there's 4 on the Rodecaster Pro. This one is a couple of $100, $300 cheaper, I think, because the Rodecaster Pro's coming in at about $700 these days, and this one is $399, so $400. It has the same number of little sound pads you can trigger with pre-recorded stuff for sound effects, etc. It has the same number of headphone preamps, headphone outputs. One thing it doesn't have is this little teeny LCD screen here, and the Rodecaster, of course, has its monster LED screen that has your levels on it. Plus, it's a touch screen that you operate all your controls, and you control all the dynamics, all the digital controls on your mix preamp. And this one has this little blue section here is your controls for each channel. So you just select which channel, and then you have the individual controls over EQ and low frequency roll off, etc. There. So it's not digital access and setting savings. I don't think they're quite as comprehensive as the more expensive Rodecaster Pro. So that's where I'd put it. I'd put it below in the pantheon of mixers. I haven't heard it yet, and I'm on a Rodecaster Pro 2 right now, which has pretty good preamps and dynamics control.
Go ahead, Alex.
I've tested, so the whole Zoom LiveTrak family is very attractive for people that are maybe in a band that they want to record a project, because the thing about Zoom is that they always give you a lot of features for not a lot of money. However, there are a lot of compromises. The main problem that I have with these LiveTrak mixers is that the analog to digital converters are just horrible. There's no... if you don't give yourself enough headroom on those preamps, it will clip in such a nasty, unpleasant way. So you got to record pretty low on that thing. So that's the one thing that I am not a fan of on these mixers. Other than that, I mean, yes, they do offer a lot of features. They've got 6 mic preamps on the L8, and then you've got, I think, 4 or 5 headphone outputs, each which can have their own mix, like the Rodecaster. If you're trying to record a podcast, and as long as you don't need more than 4 mic inputs at a time, the Rodecaster is a much better product. The preamps are much better. They have a lot more headroom, and the routing capabilities are incredible on the Rodecaster. So I would go with the Rodecaster as long as you don't need more than 4 mic preamps. Plus, the Rodecaster's got way more dynamics processing. You got compression and a lot more things you can do with the EQ and storing presets on that you can't do on the Zoom. So Rodecaster is my recommendation there.
Next question.
Next one's from Douglas Carmichael. Twitch has created a dedicated program for streaming DJs that shares revenue with music labels. Could you see YouTube following suit?
Go, Jason.
No, but I wish that they would. I think that that's really cool. As a DJ from long ago with 2 million views, I would have loved to have been on YouTube, and it just, it's not quite a thing. If you look farther down in that page, it says you're not allowed to play pre-released music, which could be a strange little gotcha there. But yeah, it'd be nice.
Yeah, I'm curious as to. It's interesting that it says it's for DJs only, and I think they're pretty specific about DJs. It says designed for channels that stream DJ sets and is not applicable for other music uses like used in a background of a gaming or just a chat or just chatting stream, which I think is fine. But I guess if you're actually doing DJ, the reason that I think this is interesting is that one of the things a lot of us have thought about for a long time is it'd be really great to reproduce radio online. You can't do that right now because the licensing costs of radio, the way that the FCC set up the licensing or whoever set up the licensing deals, it is so painful to stream over the internet that you just can't do it. And so no one does that other than the radio stations. Radio stations don't have to deal with those things. They're allowed to rebroadcast. If they have a transmitter, an FCC transmitter, and they're transmitting, they can take their show and put it on the internet. I don't think they have to pay anything for that. But they can't. You can't just create a radio station. You could here, and the kind of thing that I'm going to do some more research on is being able to every Sunday night, as a good example. We had every Sunday night used to have when I grew up. We used to have this thing called Rock Over London, and then they would play all this cool music that was coming out of Manchester and all these other things, and it was as an American, it was the little like a little 1 hour sample or 2 hour samples of that. You could do a live show now. When I saw this when the question came up, I was like, oh, I think I'd take my old radio station and that doesn't exist anymore and reproduce it as a 1 hour or 2 hour show on weekends. Be fun to do because it's something I haven't done because of takedown. So that looks like most of the channels most of the labels are in. I think that what I'm talking about is not exactly what they expect. I think what they expect is just DJs, playing songs, which I think that's great. But I think that there's a lot of other options. We'll see what they allow for. It looks like the program launches in July and August. I'll try to reach out to some folks in Twitch, and we'll see if we can't get some more information, maybe even get them on the show. Next question.
David Brady in New York City asks, what is the panel's thoughts on the deprecation of Zoom OSC for Windows?
Go ahead, Jonas.
It's sad, but also I think we've seen the trend of the liminal apps being on macOS. So I think it wasn't the most surprising thing. A lot of people that are using it are still thinking through all the options that we have in converting our existing stuff over. Maybe something else will be created, but like they also say in the email, you do have the option to just do things in Unreal Engine, do things in the C# SDK. There are all those sorts of SDKs. There are Zoom apps now, so there's a whole lot better ecosystem that maybe we don't need Zoom OSC anymore. It's still nice to have on the Mac, but I imagine that the maintenance requirements are quite high just for Windows because that's the last Windows app that they still do. So Zoom OSC obviously still will be included in Zoom ISO, but and especially with the new Zoom Room Controller SDK, you can now also build your own infrastructure and controllers around that. So that probably will also open up some solutions.
If you're on Windows and you were using Zoom OSC, what do you think is the real what's the lowest effort option to do the same things you were doing with Zoom OSC on Windows?
I think it depends on what you were doing. Like we were using it a lot for chat ties. For that one, it's still a bit of a question. You could use something like opening it up in a website and then using Social Ninja, which like grabs it out of the website, which isn't super clean. But most likely you'll need to do some development effort to build a solution that you need, or buy a Mac Mini, right? Like $500.
Have it deliver that. Have it grab the data and put it somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle asks, what's new in the Blackmagic ATEM Switchers 9.5 update?
Nigel?
So we all expected Guy to be here because we assumed this was Guy passing the ball to himself, but he wasn't. So I'll try and do my bad impression of Guy. Actually, it's a fairly significant update. And for those of us who have extremes, even the Mini Pro, here is a gift from Blackmagic for you. So this applies to the Pro ISO, the Extreme ISO, the SDI Pro ISO, and the SDI Extreme ISO. So that's really all the latest products. So it's in a bunch of different groups. They're adding SRT, streaming support. They're doing all sorts of stuff with the webcam and making a huge amount of change to the way that multi-view works, as well as general performance and stability. So there's a lot in there. We were talking about it before the show, and this is probably a firmware update, so please don't do this in the middle of a broadcast. But it does seem to be good, and if you're an ATEM client, then you should be very pleased that they are still investing in your existing products and not making you go to new ones.
Jonas?
So I actually installed it on the little demo ATEM I have back here. They added a heap of features, and they actually prepared a little thing so I can show it to you. This is on an ATEM Mini SDI Extreme ISO. We have noticed already a couple differences that is good to be aware of. If you go here into output, you now will see webcam output. On the Extreme ISO models, on all the Extreme models, it seems that you can select anything you want here, which really multi-view is what a lot of people are excited for. But this also means you can give a confidence feed to someone on Zoom with a super source or a speaker view or whatever you want, while still sending the program out to the audience. On the ATEM Mini Pro, you will see that output right now only has a program preview and multi-view. I mean, honestly, it's great that they even still work on that device. Probably their processing capabilities don't allow them to do that many cross points. And then the other big thing, so if I cut to here, normally you would need a capture card to do this kind of thing because you have the multi-view, but what I actually am doing is, this is just a webcam output of my ATEM. This switches to camera 1. Now you only see camera 1.
And if you have two outputs, would you be able to have one of the USB outputs have some? Do you know if you see two of them? I haven't. Go ahead.
I only see one of them. That's one of the limitations.
And you're in the Extreme or the base, or you're in the Extreme?
This is the SDI Extreme ISO.
Okay, so you only see one version. So it probably we would assume that it sends the same thing out of both of them if they were connected.
Yeah, it does.
Got it. Okay.
And then here, let me go to this so we can look at all the changes they did to the multi-view. So the one thing that Nigel said that I wanted to mention real quickly is the one device it didn't update is the ATEM Constellation HD line. There are still some differences right now in all those devices. So before you go to your next production, excited that all of those features are here now, please check that it's also there for your exact device. The Constellation 8K has a subset of features. Now the ATEM Minis have a subset of the features. The Constellation 4K have a higher subset of features of those. Constellation HD has some of it. And then the ATEM Television also has a subset of it. So please make sure that you actually have those features. I'm going to show you quickly what's new with the multi-view. So you can now set 16 by 9. Let me make the multi-view a little larger. You can now set frame guides on all of these. And the cool thing is you can now per box decide what the frame guides should be. So you can say 9 by 16. All of them.
So if you're building a show for a 9 by 16 show, you can have the frame guides in there so that you know what's in frame there. That's really interesting.
And in the past, you had that on the preview, but you couldn't configure it this much. And like now, even like you can per box also can say if you want the label or not. So
And you now have what we had in the Constellation, right? Where if you click on that, you could make them all squares too, right? So if you click, you can make them all big squares or all little square, all a grid.
Exactly. Yeah. And the cool, but even just being able to hide the label is helpful a lot. And
and this could be a multi-view as well, this output, right? Because now you can turn off all of your borders and everything else. And if you turned off the labels and the borders, I mean, and then put a mortise over the whole thing, you'd have a grid, right?
Let's see. Yep, if we do this, you now see all the borders are gone.
Yep. And I think we can turn the labels off as well.
You can.
And the meters.
Here and
so then you just end up with a multi-view, essentially.
Yep. And the cool thing is, of course, all of the current ATEMs also support the Video Hub TCP protocol. So you could just open this up with a Video Hub panel and route things into it, right? So that's one of the big advantages that the ATEM Mini has. And then SRT is really cool that is there now. They also added a bunch of the Blackmagic cloud stuff. So now they also go here. They also say that you can sync the recordings from the ATEM directly to Blackmagic Cloud. So if you plug in a USB drive, you can do that. They added support. In the past, it was kind of unsupported. Now it's supported that you can edit the live files. So now what you can do is you take an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO, you put a really nice drive in it, and over the network, you can access it over its share or over the FTP drive, and then you can edit it in Resolve, which also brings us to the point where you can then do the whole replay system with that. Possibly, I haven't checked that, but that seems where they're going. Yeah, and then you can also do network storage for external drives. So it looks like if you add an external drive, you might be able to also do store to a cloud store, which really makes this thing a pretty interesting product again to look at. And like the ATEM Mini Pro and Pro ISO got a big feature update. And if you have a little Pro and like a small NAC, you can send a multi-view, have a remote control for the multi-view, and similar to what we had at NAB. Now you have a completely remote controllable 4-channel switcher. And it can send SRT out with the main signal so you have a solid signal as well. So really nice update.
You could use your iPad. I mean, it's been available with other things, but you could now just use your iPad as a multi-view. You could just plug it right in.
Yeah, so the iPad also does that. And let's see if I can show that real quick. Mix Effect.
Yeah, Mix Effect.
App we all love. He also added, in the past, you needed to have a different encoder and then put it on a website and get it in that way. In Mix Effect, you can now just plug it in, set your ATEM to multi-view, and now you have a multi-view switcher on your iPad. What's really great with that is at the same point, you're still outputting all the feeds to everywhere. So now it's really a great feature. And for us at our church, it's going to allow me to get a multi-view because in the past we have one output, the program goes to stream, aux1 goes to the local multi-viewer, and aux2 goes to the monitor. In the past, it wasn't possible to also get a engineering output, and now we can.
That's great. It's really interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed any difference because I was curious if maybe Blackmagic snuck in any kind of color compensation with the UVC output, or does it kind of look the same as the previous version?
It's hard to say. And it's also it's an interpretation problem, not a output problem. They are technically in spec, out of spec. It's pretty complicated. It's not just they have a low quality codec. So I don't think they actually did that, but it's a good thing to check out.
Courtney?
Whether it crushes blacks or not, you probably haven't been using it long enough to determine if ATEM gray has ever been fixed with that little bug, intermittent bug.
ATEM gray is a bug that I've only ever seen with Zoom. And there's a specific play with software that requests your webcam to do certain things. and like those requests to be handled and all that, and changing requests, and the ATEM, where like at some point the ATEM is like, no, too many people are trying to access me. That is what my idea was why it happened. I have never seen that happen with OBS, just getting the ATEM and all. Yeah.
As you can see, we have a very technical crew here today. So if you've got questions, especially about IT, this is our foundation day. So if you've got questions about IT, very technical questions, we've got very technical people. so go ahead and ask those questions in Makana. And otherwise, you can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. Let's go ahead and jump into the next question.
Next question comes from Eric Hers in Hartford, Connecticut. SRT latency seems too high for backhaul across very long distances. What is an alternative?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm just confused about the whole question in general, because SRT is used to go around the world. I'm not sure how much longer you're trying to go, but I've actually done circles around the world.
Well, I think he's talking about the latency of it as opposed to the stability of it.
Well, still, the latency is in real time is real time. So the speed of light is speed of light. Physics are physics. You can't beat that. There is nothing that could beat the amount of latency from one data center to another data center, or from one location to another location. That is what it is. So you're not going to get faster than that. And you can get the SRT, if you have a stable enough network, you can get the SRT latency is down as low as 50 milliseconds if you needed to. I mean, I've done frequent ones under 125. I mean, what do you need more than that if you're talking about something that's reliable, something that's going to be there for you? There's just not, to go lower than that, not for broadcast by any means. I mean, that's way lower than most of the broadcast paths are already. So I don't know exactly what long distance and very long distance. I mean, we've gone all the way around the world in several productions. So I'm not real sure about what else out there besides, Zixi, their idea of low latency is a second. So that's like forever in differences. I don't understand the question as far as very long distance. Define that and latency against it.
I think the question is also what the definition of backhaul is. So for me, my whole thing is that unless you're interacting, unless you're going back and forth, I don't care. Like I don't care. I want to increase that buffer. I want to increase that buffer. I want it to be 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. I don't really care about that. There are a handful of times when it matters, when people are betting on every play, which I think is dumb. So I usually just don't bother to I'm like, oh, don't bother. But outside of that, if you're interacting, and I think that in a very controlled environment, you might be able to get below 500 milliseconds with SRT, but I haven't found it to be perfect under 500 milliseconds. So we've definitely used it for backhauls. I'm using it for backhaul today. or as another contribution in addition to a satellite and live view and stuff like that. But we're using the SRT for our backup, but we're not trying to make it super low latency. It's got to match the satellite, which has got a couple bounces, and so I'm not. So 2 or 3 seconds is fine. So a backhaul to me needs to be reasonably fast, but at the same time, what I care about is that I get every frame and I get every bit and I get all the little bits and pieces. That's what the backhaul's for. If you're talking about interaction, I don't usually use SRT for interaction, so that's not the solution that I use for that. So, but as a backhaul, if that's what you're talking about, I would not try to be getting it into a latency lower than that. I mean, fiber from China to or from the Asia to the East Coast is probably 350, 400 milliseconds. That's private fiber. Across the United States, it's 42 milliseconds. From San Francisco to LA, it's 17. So these are those, as Jeff said, that's the hard deck. That's as fast as it's going to go. Go ahead, Jason.
I've been playing around. Alex turned me on to Stream Voodoo, and I have been thoroughly impressed. I haven't played around with it, by the way, in the Vision Pro yet. I'm very much looking forward to that. I believe that this is SRT, and like the quality and the speed is astonishingly good.
It's good. It's still a couple seconds. I mean, like, so
yeah, it is.
We're testing right now what Stream Voodoo, the thing that we're specifically testing, which I think is going to be more available sometime in the near future, but I'm allowed to talk about it in public, is the stereo streaming from the iPhone 15 to the Vision Pro. And so you just literally turn the iPhone, open the iPhone up, hit go, and you can send a link to someone on a Vision Pro and they can just see stereo video. And it's amazing. But it's a couple seconds because it's SRT. Go ahead. It's SRT and HLS. Go ahead, Jonas.
So when we talk about backhaul and especially latency, there's like three factors that you can't change. There's your encode latency. How long does it take to take the raw SDI signal or whatever video signal you have and encode it into H.264, H.265, whatever codec you would like. Then there's a transport latency. I've not yet found the machine that for some reason isn't affected by physics. Sadly.
Obviously, we don't have any machines that are working with quantum entanglement yet. But as soon as we get that going, we're going to be good.
And then there's also the decode latency. That's the sad one. Then you can choose your protocol. LTMP, for example, yes, that is technically faster than SRT. You know why? Because it doesn't have any buffers, and it has some sort of buffering through the TCP stack, but it's not at all SRT. It will just be like, oh, sorry, I couldn't deliver that frame. You know what? Screw it. I don't need that frame anymore. SRT, you build a buffer on both sides. That's why it's inherently more latent than the raw signal. And then it also depends on what you're using with SRT, right? SRT is only a wrapper that allows you to send UDP traffic over the internet over WAN. Whatever you put in there also depends on you. If you want to put TS transport streams over that, or if you want to put something else, that's also going to affect the latency. But with SRT, it's one of the lowest latency backhaul. And we use it as backhaul protocol because it is low latency, but also it allows us to have a buffer and monitor that buffer and know, hey, we're actually not failing. And one of the great things with SRT compared to LTMP is, with SRT, if you have buffering, or if you have multiple cameras going with SRT, it's already pretty on time because it's not only a set like setting buffers on both sides, but it's also a set latency. So you know if I turn it on today and tomorrow, if the round trip time is still low enough that it can do everything it needs to do with like getting packets back, it will be the same latency with LTMP. You don't know. It might be higher, it might be lower. So if you're fine with that, then you need to plan for your rainy days on when the internet has a meltdown. You need to reroute all your traffic through the other half of the globe to make sure it's still reaching you. And at that point, SRT really is a great standpoint. But it's also one of those things like, yes, LTMP is faster. Yes, LTMP also uses less bandwidth. SRT uses at least 25% more bandwidth than LTMP, but that is not what it's for. So
yeah, and I think that the and it is, the encoding is really important. We did some glass to glass tests and figured out that for some cameras that we were testing, it was taking 30 milliseconds to 45 milliseconds to get from the sensor to the SDI port in the camera, like just to make sure you're clear. Like that it didn't even have to leave the building. It didn't even have to leave the camera. That's how long it was taking, a frame and a half to get out of the camera. As it goes there. One of the things that we're doing with private fiber, I do a lot of stuff with the switch, is trying to squeeze the last little bit. So like the difference between JPEG 2000 and JPEG XS is a big difference for us because we're trying to squeeze that down so that we can get under 100 milliseconds a leg across the country. And in that world, we start paying attention to what does it take to actually encode the video footage. So we also have to, I think we're going to have a second hour eventually about the RTs, the LRT, which is live views, the TRT, which is Teradex, and the SRT, which is SRT.
The DLs on the RTs.
High vision, I guess. Yeah. So the other is like, which are, I just had a conversation with Teradek about TRT, and we're going to be testing some stuff there too. Next question.
All right, this one comes from me. I'm using Bitfocus Companion 3.2.2. The current version is 3.3.1. I don't like to update to major new releases until things shake out. Has anyone tested this yet?
Jonas?
I mean, you already see that it's 3.3.1, not 3.3.0. Companion on Bitfocus has been really diligent lately in requiring us module maintainers to not send feature updates into a point release. So as soon as you see the 0.1 release, that's when I would personally update. All of our systems are updated now. Also, one good thing to note, Companion 3 has a big difference in how it all works. It is no longer that one module can mess up your whole system, that module will crash, and that module might not work. If your modules were not affected by the change, then you can probably update and just get a couple of quality of life benefits. Also, if you ever run into issues, in theory, you can also just downgrade specific modules to older versions. But I've not seen that many issues. There's still, if modules didn't work in 3.22, there's still a good chance that they also are not working in 3.3.1, because some modules nobody can be bothered to fix from version 2 over to version 3. And if they don't work, no one has time. That is how it is. But yeah, I would say go ahead and give it a try. And if you still have issues, the up and down converting for those two versions isn't too bad. So you should be able to just install the last one.
Good, Nigel.
Yeah, I'm on 3.2.2 and I'm not moving out of 3.2.2 until Adam or someone else tells me Mix Effects works. I always find when I upgrade my Companion, Mix Effect, I love it, use it every day, is the one thing that doesn't work. So I've sent messages on the forums and stuff. I'm waiting for someone to raise a green flag and say they've made Mix Effect work on 3.3 or even 3.3.1, because I'm not leaving 3.2.2 until I get that message.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida asks, has anyone used the MX Brio? Thoughts?
Go ahead, Courtney. Can't hear you, Courtney.
Sorry. I haven't used it yet. I have this wonderful Canon MX50 that I'm using. I did take a look at the specs on it, though, and they have for I think it's $199. So it's a $200 camera. They have a Sony 8.5 megapixel Sony Starvis sensor in there. It has built-in privacy shutter. It has right light. They're doing some digital mumbo jumbo with the signal now and enhancing the image based on your face. So they're adjusting the lighting, color balance, etc., based on face recognition. It says it does autofocus, HDR, white balance, exposure, and clear image in various lighting environments. It does have a show mode, which allows you to tilt it down and it flips the image vertically so that you can show stuff on your desk with the correct orientation, so it won't be upside down. It has a removable USB-C cable. That's thankful. So if you have a problem with your cable, you're not faced with a captive cable. And it has a built-in privacy shutter so that you don't have to take a piece of tape and stick it over the lens when you're not on the air.
Go ahead, Alex.
I still prefer the Insta360 link. I just think, yes, it is probably a little bit more money, but I just think for overall, for the image quality for a webcam, I haven't found a better camera. And of course, it has the ability to track your face. I think with these Logitechs, I continue to see very wide field of views. Now, I know it says 90 and it can go down to 78. My only question is, and historically in the past, there's a lot of cropping and loss of image quality when you change stuff like that. So I don't have firsthand experience. So maybe that's not a problem on these ones, but on the older ones, it always was a problem.
I think the feature set between the Link 360 for $50 more, because right now the Link 360 is selling for $249, and the Brio still looks like it's selling for $199. They're holding that MSRP right now. So for $50 more, the amount that you get, a slightly larger, it looks like the Starvis chip that the Brio is using is just a little less than 1 inch. The Link 360, the amount of features that you get out of it for $50 more, if I'm going to expend something and send something out, I'd much rather have that. Next question.
Next question is from Guy Cochran in Seattle. Which small form factor PC is powerful enough to consider using in production?
Jonas?
I would say there's a bunch of them, like the Mac Minis, for example, on the Apple thing, and now that we covered that. The little thing that I have behind me here is a Mini Throne MS01, and what's great with that one, it has an i9 processor in it, and you can put a Decklink Duo 2 Mini in it. So right now, what you saw earlier, my multi-view on the ATEM is actually Zoom Rooms Pro AV running on that system, outputting 4 ISO feeds into SDI, and it works well. Yeah, that is a really powerful, interesting platform. It is larger than a Mac, so it has just a lot better venting. If you don't need SDI in and out, you can also put a short form factor graphics card in it and then use it to run your production. And what's really cool is it has a bunch of 2 Ethernets. I think those are 2.5 gigs, and then 2 10 gigs SFPs, which really is great. So you can interconnect them, do whatever you want, feed them all the feeds you want. Then Jeff also has one. So yeah, it's a great device.
Go, Jeff.
Cheap.
You beat me to it. Yes, I'm thoroughly loving these MSL ones that we've recently purchased a few of them, and I think that they're changing the game plan. I mean, the new chipset, it's an i9 Intel, and it seems to have plenty of power. I've been using the Nook 13s for a while for certain applications, and I couldn't believe how much more efficient the chipset and the whole just infrastructure inside that computer was so much more efficient than some of our Dell platform servers that were, 1U and loud, and I've been really happy with those 13s. But of course, with Intel killing the Nook line, they left a big open hole, and the MS Minis forum with this MSL1 really hit the nail on the coffin, because this is a Quadro card inside here. This isn't a little slouch. This is a real graphics card, and it did take a little bit to find one that fit, though. So you do have to really make sure it'll fit. There's a new one coming out soon, the A1000, that should even be better than what I have. This is a P1000 I have in here currently, and I have to use these silly little adapters, which I hate. It's that display port, mini display port to display port, or you could get them to HDMI too. But we're running Linux on it, or Ubuntu running Sienna Cloud, and I'm doing 8 sources up into our cloud infrastructure off of this, and it's just like cruising along at 30%. And then that's amazing that we can get that kind of power out of such a small box.
Go, Alex.
Yeah, so it depends, I guess, what exactly are you going to be doing? What are the requirements for production, and also how small do you have to go? I know that you can get these B-Link mini computers, so they make them actually with these Ryzen 9 chips in here, 16 gigs of RAM, HDMI 2.1 compliant ports as well, and I believe this one has it's got a 12-core graphics card in there. So something like that. This would be considerably more powerful than the little Melee Quieter 3 PCs that we've talked about before, which are basically quad-core Celeron chips. So they're a little underpowered for doing serious graphic stuff. They're fantastic for just basic playback machines. But beyond that, this would be the next step up. And it sounds like Jeff's option there is a great option as well.
Courtney?
It depends on what you want to use them in production for. Some of the really cheap ones, like this GMK, this is a 97C. This has an N97 chip in it. This, I've been stress testing this one. It does have a fan in it. You can just barely hear it. But I ran 18 HD playbacks continuously for 4 days. Never crashed, never throttled down. So something like that can be used for playback, and they're like $168. Also, I've been able to use the Quieter 4, which is the N100 base from Melee. I've actually run, this one comes with 16 gigabytes of memory and 256 NVMe drive, but you can put a 4 terabyte NVMe in there. They're replaceable, and if you like. And so for doing playback or routing, I've even run DaVinci 18 on that little Quieter 4, which was selling for about $220 when they were available. So, you can do color correction on it in DaVinci 18, which is pretty amazing for something that's that size and that price.
Next question.
Next question is from Danny Grizzle, Longview, Texas. Considering building a mobile PTZ-based package From the standpoint of 1, the remote controllers, Sony versus Canon versus Blackmagic design, and 2, cabling, NDI/Ethernet, what are the pros and cons of PTZ for easy mobile productions?
Jonas?
So it kind of depends. We had PTC Optics last week, and they had their cameras that can stream and be remote controlled all with just a camera. But most of the time, you'll probably are going to need a solution that provides you with backhaul. Because one of the issues that we see if you do it just on the camera is that you still need to sync it, and not most of the PTZ still not support like SEI metadata that would allow you to actually sync all of the cameras. With SRT, you're probably pretty close still, so you could do that. And then you need some form of either network access or application layer access. There's some options there. You can just use a VPN, for example, like we did it for office hours at NAB. You can just use a peplink, the peplink B1, for example, and then plug all your devices in there, and then you can remote that up to the cloud, and then there anyone can connect, and then it doesn't matter. If I build a remote setup, I would build it vendor agnostic, because you might want to switch out, hey, this is like a Canon. You might want to switch out to Panasonic, whatever you want. I do like my Canon N300. Those are below the Panasonics, both in price and quality of the image. But you get a really nice image for the price point that they're at. But yeah, I would choose one of those. And then on NDI or SDI, or what the cabling looks like, you'll always need to run Ethernet. You won't get around Ethernet. If it's high powered, you probably also need to run power. It's probably still safer to run power than rely on a centralized PoD switch that provides all the power, especially if you have multiple. And then you need to think about backhaul, something like the MSO1 that can take in a bunch of SDI signals and bring them up to the cloud or to you remotely might be an option. A live view might be an option, or remote encoder, putting them into a 4K quad and then sending a 4K that way might be an option. One thing to keep in mind is you also need a low latency way to monitor those and to look at them. So for example, we use a lot of WebRTC for that. So make sure you have a way that you can still look at the picture. Also keep in mind those web controllers that are nice, that you might be able to just ship a little NUC with it, put a Cloudflare tunnel on it, and you're good. Until suddenly your Sony web controller is using 15 to 20 Mbits of bandwidth, and you are just dead in the water because you are using 100 Mbits of sending really high quality pictures up to the cloud, but not any of them that you can use because it just go to your controller. So yeah, that's what I would do. The cheapest option probably is like some form of OBS backhaul, or use a camera that has an SRT backhaul, and then put a small PC there that can provide you with that multi-view over WebRTC, and then put something like Companion there. That's how a lot of our clients have been successful in small and mighty deployments.
Go, Jeff.
I just want to comment on how great it is that Jonas and I are both here. And we both immediately, in my mind, I was thinking, yeah, you get the video up to the cloud, you control it from the cloud, and because we were both like totally synced into that. And then I reread the question a couple of times, and I was like, mobile PTZ based. So it doesn't necessarily fully remote. So as an alternative, Danny, if you're just moving PTZs from place to place, a lot of what Jonas said too, but just take out all the backhaul stuff and all that stuff if you want to be simple about it. I do agree 100% with Jonas is on the control platform. Go with something that has a better option to be able to be used across multiple. So if you just absolutely have to have hardware, use a Skorhoy. Invest in a Skorhoy controller that can talk to multiple manufacturers, because that way you're not locked into the camera you select at this time to purchase. You may want to keep that control platform and use it. Maybe you start out with something in the middle line, and you want to move up to Panasonic's or move up to Sony's down the road. Your controller interface could still be used for that. We use Mark Roberts motion control for ours, and it is ambiguous to many, many different ones. So we can actually use a lot of different cameras with it, and we do all the time. So it really just depends on what you're shooting also. So if you're shooting sports, for instance, that's going to be a different set of controls, unless you're shooting just walking, talking things on a stage. That's a lot easier to do with a lot of different controllers out there. But if you are trying to really follow along the action and things like that, look for a better investment. You're only up in Longview. Come on down here to Beaumont this weekend, and let's have a day, and I'll show you all the fun stuff that we have, and then we'll just make a party out of it.
Yeah, I think that I've done a lot of mobile PTZ work. In fact, most of my jobs include PTZs. I think that when you think about using a PTZ specifically, regardless of what brand or whatever, it's the disadvantage is there are things that are hard to do with PTZs. And it's not that they're impossible to do, they're just difficult, which is randomly following people walking towards you. So when someone's walking towards you and they're coming across like this, being able to follow them. A really good PTZ operator can do that, but it's hard to find people that are good enough to do that with a PTZ, and usually it's easier to find a camera operator. So a lot of times, like the package that I use for a lot of our interviews has 4 FR7s and 1 FX6, and that 1 FX6 is the one that is being remotely controlled. I mean, has one operator, and then the other 4, because the rest of them are designed for people once they sat down. So once they sit down, and if you're doing a lot of discussions, the PTZs become, discussions of PTZs are amazing. You don't have as many people in the room. You get there, it doesn't distract the folks that are there. So for roundtables and presentations and everything else, we just love PTZs because they're just, it's not really an expense issue as much as it is, a heat, sound, distraction issue of having them there. And now they've gotten so good. The PTZ optics, which we showed last week, has a lot of great remote controls. Again, what we used at NAB is what I use on a regular cadence, which is the Sony FR7s, because I really like the full frame sensors. I think they look amazing. I mean, they just but the other ones that we've used in the past are a lot of the Panasonic 150s and the BRC 1000s, or I think and those are the advantage of those PTZs is that they have a much longer throw. The lenses are built in and they'll throw from the back of the room, whereas the FR7s, you can put longer lenses on it, but they really tap out I think that the 135, the 28 to 135 is the one that works the best on it. And when you put longer lenses on it, I don't think it does as well. So you really are 20 feet away. 15, 20 feet away is about as far as you're going to go with an FR7. Most of my shows, that's as far as I go. So it doesn't bother me at all. But because I just feel like for most of my shows, the online audience is more important than the in-room audience. And so I put the cameras wherever I want them. So that's the distinction there. But if you need to put them in the back, then you're going to want to look for PTZs that have longer throws, like the 150s or the BRC 1000s or the PTZ optics or other ones. Most of them will have the long feet because they're usually designed that way. But what I will say is that once you start using them, and then if you want to use a heavier camera, the other ones that I had 5 of the telemetrics heads that we used with Blackmagic Ursas, with big cine lenses and so on and so forth. And so you can go into having a control head. Mark Roberts makes a lot of great control heads. There's again, telemetrics is the one that I used, and almost all of these have some IP control, whether you're using their board or somebody else's. Go ahead, Jeff.
I have a surprise for you then, Alex. Coming around the corner right now, because I just absolutely have one of my Mark Roberts heads around the corner that we're doing some testing with. This is a AFC 100. So this is the one, and now this is we have a specific designed this part here, this arm. It's not straight down, and that's because our camera design, it has a really heavy lens in the front, so it offsets it, so that way the center of gravity is in the right place here on the actual mechanics of it, and the servos don't jiggle a little bit whenever you're moving around. But the key, this is what brought me into the Mark Roberts world, is all this. It's all IP to start with. So that's where the telemetrics did not have at the time. And I absolutely love these heads. They are expensive. They're not cheap. 15,000 US, I think now. It all depends. They're UK based, so it kind of fluctuates a little bit from day to day. The next head that you were talking about from back of the room. So the next head that we have on the way is a PTA2, which is a bigger brother of this one, and it will hold a 99X, or actually 107 is what I'm putting on it, 107X box.
Yeah.
That's going to be a game changer. I can't wait to have it in my hands.
Absolutely.
Because you can put it anywhere. You don't have to worry about somebody behind it. You could hide it up in the stands or whatever, and you're not worried about a bunch of seat blocks.
And and again, I think that there are, I want to distinguish, like when we talk about this, there are definitely places where we're like, that's a human operator. Like we need to do things. We need to move the camera. We need really, really fine control over it. And there, especially when you have great camera operators, I don't think PTZs are a replacement for camera operators. They augment that. Oftentimes we throw them in more cameras that are, more, we have more cameras because we have PTZs, and then we let the humans do the really, really fine tuning of the show and then have just more angles.
But at the same time, we're running this as a pan bar setup, so it's as if they're sitting behind the camera itself. Sorry to tag me in, but
absolutely.
It's a different experience.
Next question.
Zoxtal Smish from Chautauqua, New York asks, I have an NVIDIA GeForce GT 1030 and a 6-core i5 processor. Is this enough power on my machine to run a multicorder of 6 inputs in vMix, or should I make some other investments to achieve this? Recordings are at 720p. Thanks.
Go ahead, Alex.
I would recommend taking a look at and sticking to the manufacturer's recommendations for system requirements for vMix. Some of that hardware looks a little underpowered and older than what they would recommend. In my experience, I'm not a vMix user, but in my experience, when you're going to use an application, trying to undercut what they recommend as the defaults for the system is generally a recipe for disaster or failure or potential problems. And if you're going to be using this for something that counts, not just, messing around for fun, I wouldn't trust the system with an older graphics card with a processor that isn't as capable as, say, an i7 or an i9. And they recommend at least an i7 here with 8 gigabytes of RAM. So, maybe test it and see how it goes. But I would stick with the recommendations.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely, way underpowered. No, i5 shouldn't be even alive. I just don't ever do anything from an i7 up, and 6 cores is just it's gonna struggle. Yeah, that whole system's way underpowered. So that's just the quick and short of it. If you want to get into something more powerful right off the bat, call me or Jonas, and we'll get you into a cloud system for relatively nothing per hour, and you don't have to make a huge investment out. And then you could do a lot of these things for a lot less.
Good, Courtney.
Well, I have a cloud for you. Yes, see me now. Yeah, it is. I agree. It is underpowered. It depends. I'm not running vMix, and I'm not sure how much it depends on the GPU versus the CPU. If it's using more GPU, you could upgrade to something like the RTX line. This is a generation ago's RTX 3060. For about $285 if you've got the dual slots available in your case to accommodate this, and the power supply can accommodate it because it pulls a little bit more power. That you could upgrade that and see how well it works if vMix is using mainly the GPU to do its processing. That may bring it up to enough spec, and also make sure if you're going to be recording that you have an NVMe drive in there so that you can record to a very fast NVMe drive so that you won't run into bottlenecks on your drive.
Next question.
This one's for me. Does PlayoutBee have watch folder support? I bought it but haven't set it up yet. I'd like to have a shared folder on the network where I can drop files.
If only we could get a hold of the developer of PlayoutBee.
He's impossible to get.
But wait, he's here. He's on the show. Jonas, go ahead.
So let me cut to that real quick. Basically, yes, you can, if you go into your settings there, click on Enable Watch Folder, you can set the path here. It works bidirectionally. So let's say I have these 2 images that for whatever reason I want to play out, and they're here. So now I could play them. Works for images, video, music, whatever. But the other thing is, if you delete one of those, you will see that it also, after it is played, will also get rid of that. And we'll sync it back to that. So yeah, it works well. We have a couple of clients that use it with something like Dropbox or similar. Use it for digital signage. Because what you can still do is you can set it up to loop and rotate. And yeah.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, I was watching the CBS News YouTube stream at the SpaceX Starship launch and it was very smooth 720p despite it being a screen capture from X. How would you capture / re-encode across services without losing a VSync?
Jonas?
The most simple version probably is someone did a full screen and just captured it in that way, but you could also pull the HLS segments off it. It's also likely that CBS News actually gets a little feed delivered to them or has a portal where they can pull those feed down. I doubt that they just screen scraped it from X. There probably was an SRT or TS feed or something where they could just pull it down and get it themselves, probably through one of the big organizations. That is quite common.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they were pulling it from X. Now, in other places where there's HLS support, a lot of times a lot of us will sneak in with developer tools, and you look at the code and you can see where the manifest is, and you can grab onto it and put it wherever you want it, and then you're going to get you can get out of the browser and get back to something that's going to play it out directly. So that's one way that some people grab it. I haven't tried to do that with X. I've definitely done it with other streams, and so that's another possibility there. But I would be very surprised if CBS News actually took a screen capture of X and put it on broadcast. But it could. The quality of a lot of their remotes might be possible that they would grab something from X. So anyway, next question.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri asks, Alex, you've mentioned a live on-screen large head can be Wizard of Oz-like. Do you plan for that effect, or was it serendipity?
I think we just noticed it was happening. It was being requested of us. So we were working with heads of state, with some CEOs, with C-suite, and delivering these. What happens typically with a head of state or with a CEO or C-suite is they've been flying all over the place to do these appearances, and this has happened before COVID. This wasn't during COVID. And then they would do this like, oh, I've got a pinch. I got to be in Singapore, but I've got another meeting that's important in here. And we're talking about people that are making tens of millions of dollars a year sometimes. It's really expensive to take them to Singapore or to Morocco or to something else like that. It doesn't really pencil out for them to show up in person, but it was the only way to do it. And they really wanted to show that they cared. Then they did typically what would happen is they would do an internal meeting where they do an all hands, and they'd show up in New York for the all hands, or they'd show up, remotely and then have a screen behind them or whatever. And they go, oh, this is amazing. I walked out of my, because we would build it right outside their office. I walk out of my office, I sit down, I do it, and I didn't have to fly. I don't have jet lag. I don't have any of those other things. And then they're like, could you do this with Australia? You're like, yeah, sure, we can do it. Can you do it with this? And before you know it, everybody's they don't ever want to leave their office. Most executives, most salespeople like to travel. Most executives don't. It's just a huge disruption to their entire environment. So they tend to not do that. And what we found when we saw them doing that was really that they had this commanding Wizard of Oz kind of presence that we didn't expect. And we made little adjustments, like we put the monitor. You'd think that they want to look in the teleprompter, but we learned putting the audience right below the camera, brought their eye line down, and it coming off the screen, it looks like they're looking right at the audience. And so it was a very effective way to do it. And we've seen, some pretty tense discussions back and forth between folks in the audience and folks on the screen without any, as if they were there. But definitely what we realized was when they were on that big screen and they're not on the stage, they feel much more imposing than they did when they were on the stage. When the person argues with them, it's much harder for them to argue because there's this giant head talking to them and they don't see the little person behind them. The thing that like Wizard of Oz. And so it had definitely different effect, if that's the effect that you're actually looking for. So anyway, that's what we learned. And again, we didn't know that when we started. Many things that we do, we didn't know when we started. Someone asked for something, like we do a lot of things in the round. When it was first asked for, I told them they were crazy. I thought I'll never do a bunch of people talking to each other in the round. There's a reason why it's all on one side. And I was completely wrong. It's the best way to do it. So it was, but it took us a long time to figure that out. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about sports. We have Imri Halevi is going to be here in just a second to talk about sports. Just a quick reminder, if we send the questions back to you, by the way, at the end of the hour, they're not gone forever. They're sent back to you. You can find them in your notes. You can put them back in. If you put them into the QR code, you can actually they'll just get pushed back to the QR code and back to you. Tomorrow we will do Q&A. So just general Q&A on Saturday. Sunday's a little bit more of introspection where we talk more about, you can complain to us or have great ideas for us or just ask us general philosophical questions. We still will do tech, but we prefer philosophy on Sundays. Reminder that we have the panel meeting on Saturday. That's at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you like what you see here and you'd like to help us financially, you can go to officehours.global/donate, and we would appreciate all of your support. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the second hour. Welcome back.